My name is Kristen Snowden, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified life coach. I help individuals and couples navigate betrayal, addiction, and relationship crises so that they can heal, rebuild trust, and move forward.
Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you could be here today. My name is Kristen Snowden. I am doing this webinar in conjunction with the free online community Wetonglin. So thank you for having me. And today we're going to talk about a very controversial topic that's been coming up a lot in my webinars. And these are the questions of, does sex addiction and the diagnoses around that, does that even exist? Is it even real? Or is it just an excuse? Is it a framework for allowing therapists to coddle the addict or the one with the acting out behaviors, the betrayer? Or does it actually have clinical applications? Does it actually help with treatment, sobriety, recovery, and all those things? So I'm going to talk about all of that today, just so you understand some of my background. I've been in this field of working in sex, love, porn addiction, intimacy disorders, infidelity recovery, and addiction recovery in all addictive type things, from substance abuse to gambling to our phones, all of the things. I worked in residential treatment, and I ran a men's drug and sex addiction program for a couple years. And then I predominantly worked with either the couples recovering or the betrayed partners. You can find out more about me on my website, kristensnowden.com. So let's start with this concept of, is sex addiction even real? And again, you're going to hear lots of different titles, and it is because our DSM, our Diagnostic Statistical Manual, that's a giant book that we get when we get our graduate degrees in treating mental health disorders. It's also used, by the way, for insurance to validate this person is diagnosed with this, and then we're going to give them this kind of treatment, and that's how we get reimbursement. And then that's how psychiatrists prescribing medication, that's how they work the whole assessment. So again, it's kind of all created, these diagnoses are created to kind of hold up a structure of insurance reimbursement, and that's just something to note off to the side. It does maybe also help with continuity of care, right? If their files with information saying that this person has a history of suffering from depression, anxiety, bipolar, mania episodes, addiction, ADHD, things like that. But so our Diagnostic Statistical Manual does not acknowledge sex addiction as a disorder. It will often go under what we call the impulse disorders. But our ICD, the World Health Organization's diagnostic manual, the ICD-10 and 11, did add compulsive sexual behavior disorder to their diagnostic manuals. I even tend to just call these things generally intimacy disorders, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But they are essentially a giant blanket term for describing people who struggle so much with the vulnerability of themselves, their feelings, what's going on in their heart and mind and life, and the shame that they have, and the uncertainty of this world, and the I'm not enough shame voices, and also sitting with other people's experiences of those kind of things. They have a intimacy disorder where they're unsure how to deal with that within themselves and other people. So they have a disordered way of connecting with themselves and humans, and they do it in a very destructive, harmful way. But ICD-11 calls compulsive sexual behavior disorder, CSBD. It's characterized by a persistent pattern of a failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges, leading to repetitive sexual behaviors. These behaviors persist for 6 months or more, and this is the important part, they cause significant distress or impairment in critical areas of one's psychosocial functioning. You're going to hear this a lot because it's basically saying that it has to cause a problem in their social situation, their relational problems, maybe with the law, etc. The essential features that are required for CSBD is a persistent pattern or failure to control these intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges, resulting in acting out in these behaviors. They engage in repetitive sexual activities, and it's become a central focus to their life, to the point that they're neglecting their health, personal care, interests, activities, and responsibilities. The person has made numerous unsuccessful efforts to control or significantly reduce these behaviors. This person's continued to engage in repetitive sexual behavior despite adverse consequences. to their relationships, legal situation, social environment, etc., the person continues to engage in repetitive sexual behavior, even though the individual derives potentially little or no satisfaction from it. But that really is kind of saying they kind of just keep seeking it out because it's never enough. Like doing it once, doing it twice doesn't actually complete the desire. It keeps you kind of wanting more to do more. The pattern of failure to control intensifies and has to exist for at least 6 months. And the pattern of repetitious sexual behavior causes marked distress. Now, a rule out condition is that it cannot be a part of a moral judgment or a disapproval about sexual impulses, urges. That alone can exist, that the person is acting outside societal moral structures and value systems. It has to kind of go beyond that in order to meet that requirement. So you have to think about that. Does your partner, when you're thinking about yourself and your behaviors, or your partner, do they meet some of those requirements? And then I also always ask betrayed partners and those who are engaging in sexual acting out, pornographic abuse, or problematic pornography use, chronic infidelity, use of maybe chronic patterns of cheating, paying for sex, massage parlors, online sexual acting out behaviors, websites, nefarious behaviors related to that kind of stuff, or again, a strong pattern of seeking out very destructive, chaotic people and having relationships with them and going in and out and engaging in very destructive relational exchanges with people. Those can all fall under our general definition of addiction, which again, the DSM Diagnostic Statistical Manual does acknowledge addiction. It'll focus in on substance use as the addictive, like primary source of addiction, like that they ingest a chemical and therefore they are addicted to that chemical. However, they also acknowledge that there's concepts around process addictions, and process addictions are you're addicted more to the ritual, to the hunt, to the chaos, to the cycle of pursuing and then hating yourself for it, and then promising that you're never going to do it again, and swearing to your family you're never going to do it again, and that you have this under control, and kind of engaging in that insanity cycle. But it's a behavior. It's not necessarily I'm ingesting the chemical and I'm addicted to the chemical. That's what's creating the addiction. So this is where we can kind of take the DSM definition of addiction and apply it to the ways that people will use compulsive sexual behavior, unhealthy, really toxic, cyclical relational patterns, problematic pornography use, and apply it to concepts around, okay, this person looks like they're showing up with addiction. And those requirements are that the person is showing an increase of tolerance. And for sexual acting out behaviors, you can show that maybe you started either just watching pornography for a short period of time and then it turned into multiple hours. And then there's physical and financial consequences and relational consequences to your pornography use. You're hiding it. Same concept around maybe I started with one infidelity or inappropriate relationships, then it turned into paid sex or sneaking away to massage parlors. And again, there's signs of this wasn't just a dark season of someone's life that's triggered by multiple stressors. This is a chronic, protracted set of patterns that show there's compulsive behaviors, a long list of poor decision making that fits more in line with like an increased level of tolerance. So you have to do it more to get higher, to engage more in more intense feelings. Another sign of addiction is withdrawal. Right? There's the getting really grumpy and unable to handle the in-between acting out periods. The exceeding the initial intention of time spent, money spent. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to spend this much money. I didn't mean to give all this money to some lady on a pornographic website or go to these massage parlors, or I meant to watch pornography for 10 minutes and then it turned into 3 hours. And you exceed the initial intention. Then for addiction, the other requirements are that there has to be unsuccessful attempts at trying to stop or control the behavior. And it also has to require them to neglect their responsibilities relationally, socially, recreationally, or again, legally. And there has to be a continuation of these behaviors despite the harm and consequences that have occurred because of these behaviors. And of course, relational problems. So there's a lot of terms. Again, we use sex addiction, intimacy disorders, compulsive, sexual compulsive disorders. I just really try to help clients and their partners understand that the way I most basically sum up addiction is a really long pattern of making really poor choices. That when good things happen in life, bad coping skills, bad choices made. When bad things happen in life, really bad coping skills, bad choices. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, about why it's kind of important to understand that as a foundation. It's important to know all of these things in detail. So meaning their patterns of behavior, when they act out, how they act out, in how many different ways, in what exact way, in order to establish what sobriety would potentially look like and what the plan or structure for accountability would be for that acting out person. So again, when we're going to go back and talk about CSATs and APSATs, certified sex addiction therapists, and the two biggest models that we use to train therapists to help them understand how to treat this type of client when they come into their offices. And I want you to realize that this is very nuanced. You don't learn how to ask these kind of questions about someone's sexual acting out behaviors in just normal master's or PhD programs. So it is really important that we have some kind of, structured training to help these therapists along when what looks like maybe to them just a run-of-the-mill infidelity incident. It gives them this way to kind of ask more questions, find out more information, establish what really has been going on here, what's the history here. And these types of training really help with that information collection that is so important to establishing what recovery would look like and what the healing process would look like for both the acting out person and their partner. All of these things, from sex addiction, love addiction, pornography, all of these types that fall under these umbrellas, it's just a chronic pattern of a disordered way of connecting with oneself. And again, maybe because they just didn't have the upbringing where they learned how to do that. Maybe they were also raised in an addict type household. And they also don't have a healthy way of connecting with other human beings. There's often a lot of lying, manipulation, whatever they see out front is just like, pay attention to whatever's out front. I can do whatever I want and I have entitlement to do whatever I want back here in my secret double life that I'm living. And I'll do anything and everything to protect you from seeing what's back here. Because then if you see what's back here, you're going to know who I really am and how horrible I am. And then no one's going to love me. And then I'm really going to be alone. That's kind of what the core of all these types of behaviors are, what's at the foundation of them. And so this acting out person just struggles with healthy coping choices to manage the discomfort of just life's challenges, the pain, the shame voices, the vulnerability of it all, the trauma that one experiences, the attachment traumas, the wounds, and all the above. And again, part of recovery is going through all of this stuff. And let me clarify this too. I have other videos that talk about what is sex addiction and what I call, again, dark seasons of one's life, infidelity. So again, a dark moment in one's life, in their situation, and they made poor choices in that moment of their life, and they cheated or struggled with any of these kind of behaviors, but don't show a really strong, protracted pattern of often making these choices and struggling with these problems. So there's substance use and process addictions. And then there is sometimes people who just have really dark seasons of their life that are triggered by traumatic events or big questions and problems in their life. All painful, all destructive, but we tend to approach both of these in different ways. And I talk more about that in other videos that are about, addiction versus infidelity. So let's deconstruct the concept of is sex addiction even real? So this is something that's really important, is creating a framework for the recovery and healing process is why I believe we have concepts like sex addiction, problematic porn use, compulsive sexual behaviors, love addiction. We are creating a language so we can talk about it, so we can record it, so we can share it with other mental health professionals, so we can understand these patterns. It is a framework for the recovery process, the treatment protocols, and the healing process. It is not ever an excuse. And so there's concepts that we have in the 12-step world, in the recovery world, which is like, shame drives the addiction cycle. So, try not to add to the shame by shaming your partner, or relapse is part of the recovery. Again, that's kind of more about shame resiliency. Or we also have this saying in the sex addiction treatment world that's called tell the truth and tell it faster. These are all things that we say to the addict who is in our office trying to get help. That can feel unacceptable and coddling to the betrayed partner, right? Tell the truth, tell it faster. Like, no, they should just tell the truth, period. Or relapse is part of the recovery. No, just don't do it. You've done it too many times. It needs to stop. There's this constant push-pull between wanting to create a framework and understanding for this is what this person is struggling with. This is their pain, their trauma, their unhealthy coping skills. This is how we want to move them from over here to over there. And then we also have the betrayed partner who's been deeply wounded and extremely angry and very sad about what their partner has done. And they need their healing. They need their validation. They need empathy and compassion where there probably has been none for so long. And therapists are constantly trying to find the space between those two often conflicting scenarios, or clients, I should say. So just remember that labeling someone as an addict is simply a clinical diagnosis of someone having a broken brain reward system. It is not a moral bypass. Understanding the neurobiology of compulsivity and compulsive sexual behaviors, or again, addictive cycles, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the state change that they're seeking, the intensity they're seeking, the numbing out behaviors they're seeking, explains the why behind these addicts' behaviors, but absolutely is never an excuse to the harm that they have caused. The addiction that is present is just a way of saying, look, this person has a major decision-making tree processing problem in their brain. That's kind of what I say. We have those decision trees like, should I do this? Yes or no? If yes, go over here. If no, go over here. And addicts, time and time again, show that their best thinking gets them in the wrong place with the wrong choices over and over again. And so by me saying, hey, it looks like you have addiction issues, what I'm saying is you make really poor choices. You overemphasize the potential reward of doing these insane behaviors and extremely underestimate the cost or the negative consequences if you were to go do these behaviors. And, similar to what steps 1 through 3 are saying is, since you've shown a powerlessness in this type of behavior, you need to accept other people into your life who have recovery in these areas and start living in consultation with them, because you have a long history of making really poor choices. So what these do, I believe, the addiction model and using compulsive sexual behavior disorders as a model to define what this person is coming in with, what he or she is struggling with, it just provides a definition of what their biggest obstacles are to healing, to reaching stability, to becoming a person that they want to be, or that their partners want to be with, or that their loved ones want to be around, and reestablishing safety and stability for their partner, for their home environment, and again, for people around them. Now let's talk a little bit about what this recovery would look like. So if I said, okay, this guy or girl looks like an addict, the immediate goal, it's broken into 3 general phases, which is like the immediate goal is to stop the behavior. And again, because they are often very good liars, cheaters, manipulators, they breathe in and they're lying, they breathe out and they're lying. There also has to be strong defining of what stopping that behavior is going to look like, and strong accountability and structure around that. But yes, stopping the acting out behavior is paramount. Then defining what that would look like, again, takes a professional to help you ask the right questions to define what we call the circle plan. It's our general way of defining what does recovery look like. So I'm in relapse if I do any of the very center circle behaviors. I am doing slippery slope, dangerous behaviors if I'm over here. This is the do these things with caution. So for instance, if I'm not going to cheat on my partner anymore, but then I look at their long history and it looks like every time they go on a business meeting, they end up cheating. or again, drinking or doing these things that they're trying not to do. So those are those slippery slope behaviors out here. And it is a cue for us as treatment professionals, or again, professionals in this field. And again, their sponsors and the people around them that are here to lift them up and help them stay sober, to create a structure around that, that if they have to travel for work, they better be calling us regularly. What we call bookend. So I arrived at the airport, I'm going to call you, tell you my plan. I'm going to go straight to the gate, fly, not drink, go, and then regular check-ins to, again, establish structure, stability, safety for the partner as well. Then our next step is to break down denial, right? Acknowledging the reality of what the addiction is and its consequences, right? That it's not just, what she didn't know wouldn't hurt her. And I work really hard and I've given a really great life to my partner and kids. And so I just figured what they don't know doesn't bother them. And I'm entitled to go do whatever I want. Maybe, my partner nags me all the time and puts so much pressure on me. This is my special thing that I have the right to go do for all these reasons. It's our job to confront those kind of things and challenge that distorted thinking and help them establish empathy and compassion for how their behaviors have harmed their partner and their loved ones. So that's also another thing, establishing safety, identifying triggers that lead someone to act out, and then establishing empathy and compassion so they can be more present with their partners and understand how their behaviors harm them. The next phase is the repair and healing. So once the behavior has stopped, hopefully, the therapist can help the client look under the hood to fix the engine, so to speak. The trauma work, right? Identifying the childhood wounds and attachment injuries that led them to seek out these intensity, numbing, chaos ensuing, behaviors and choices, despite the promises they made, despite their own moral compasses, despite the harm they've caused. Then CSATs and APSATs are trained to do what we call formal disclosures, a structured therapist-led process where the addict shares the full timeline of acting out behaviors and the history with their partner to kind of, again, it has multi-purposes, and there's a lot of videos on full therapeutic disclosures, so go watch those videos about why they do them. Restoring integrity, so moving away from the life of secrets and lies and towards radical honesty, and again, with structure while leaning into their treatment community. Then phase 3 is long-term maintenance, which is focusing on preventing relapse and building a meaningful life, repairing the harm that's been caused when applicable, lifestyle balance, healthy intimacy, learning how to do real into me, you see, like real honesty. Now you kind of know me. Can you like me? And creating a vision of, and then engaging the community and being of service to other people. That's a huge concept for 12-step recovery. What's the model for recovery for betrayed partners? Well, we've done a lot of work in betrayed partner recovery. And I think pretty much every clinician now agrees that there's major, major trauma that has been experienced when you uncover that your partner has been lying to you and living this other double life, and you're uncovering these secrets, and this is not the person you married, and who is this person, and I can't believe they're capable of this, and are they going to murder me in my sleep, right? That's highly traumatizing. My most recent videos recently, I talk about the unique scars of betrayal trauma, so I'd encourage you to watch that if you want more information about how betrayed partners are in a full attachment injury trauma state. And so they require a lot of, their partner is not one to trust at this time anymore. So I quickly want to get them attached to a group of other betrayed partners where they don't hold this information in, they can share it, they can talk about it, they can make sense of it. I'm there to educate them on what's happened, what is sex addiction, intimacy disorders. And again, I can't educate anybody if I don't have language for this kind of stuff. So that's another reason why we have these labels, is it's so I can communicate to them, look, I ran a men's drug and sex addiction program. This is the kind of stuff I saw. These are the types of behaviors that occur. This is what 12 steps is, and what the recovery process tends to look like for people. The neurobiology, how does one end up being like this? What happens in their brain and body that causes them to go out and do these things over and over again? And so we educate them on that. We try to establish safety and stability outside the relationship at first, right? With community, betrayed partners groups, other church groups, skilled professionals, safe friends. And then eventually, if it's appropriate, safety and healing back inside the relationship, again, where appropriate. Other ways, things that I really try to focus on for betrayed partner recovery is reconnecting their broken instincts and intuition because they've been lied to and manipulated for so long. Using the groups and outside relationships to help act as a new model for healthy, intimate, honest connection. These people are safe, right? My partner right now has shown he or she's not safe, but these people can hold space for my story. They can show up with compassion. I can share my goals that I want to hold this boundary, or I want to, get this trauma treatment and recovery, and they can help me stay accountable on my end so I can move through this healing process, and then help me set boundaries. And then there's evidence-based trauma treatments. Again, I have so many videos on that. And then eventually the repair process would lead to couples repair work. So some of the complaints about how the addiction recovery model with CSATs and ABSATs, it can cause them to, the word ends up being more like coddling, right? Creating an excuse that instead we're focusing so much on the addict, his or her behavior, understanding, okay, it's going to be really hard to get recovery. Sometimes, you're going to keep lying at first and manipulating. You're going to maybe hide your precious acting out behaviors, sneak around, relapse, trickle truths, things like that. And betrayed partners will kind of see that as like, again, you're not like throwing the gauntlet down and creating this type of hardcore punishment and yelling and screaming and you're bad and you're wrong. And instead it makes me feel invalidated and it makes me feel unsafe. That you are not acknowledging the insanity of this behavior. And so that's a big complaint, but let's talk about that for a moment. Again, if the framework minimizes any kind of gaslighting, lying, and emotional abuse that is existent as just like, this is a symptom of addiction, this is like what they do, that is traumatic. So that's not acceptable to ever take like that these behaviors are ever okay, you're given a pass. That's not ever helpful. There's certainly a state of validating that like this unfortunately is common, it's present. Because even though you're seeing this, the relapses or the trickle truths or still the manipulation and gaslighting and lying about other things, I see them, it happens, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no hope. Like this tends to be what it looks like for the first 6 months. It's like as the addict kind of deals with the defensiveness and the shame and all that, like exposure. It's kind of part of just helping someone understand how this tends to go and show up. But just remember, all therapists are different. They approach it all in different ways. Some are kinder, gentler, softer. Some of them, which some clients need that, and some are harsher and more black and white and more straightforward. And again, some clients need that type. And the circumstances are different. Sometimes people don't relapse. Some people don't continue to lie and manipulate. And also just don't forget with the frustrations with the professionals, the CSATs and APSATs, the professionals in this industry are humans too. We are capable of being bamboozled. We are capable of being lied to and manipulated. We are not, that stuff happens to us too. And so does that mean that we're terrible at what we do? I don't know. But it's just possible for us to get bamboozled as well, just like everybody else was. So let's close out with some of these concepts, which is that I'm hoping those of you who have experienced frustration with CSATs, ABSATs, those who are treating sex addicts, those who struggle with problematic, compulsive sexual behaviors, pornography, chronic infidelity, that therapy is still an art. The way that you engage people and the timing and how you engage and challenge. The number one rule for me to ever show up as a therapist and start working with someone is that they have to come into my office and present that something's not working for them anymore. Now, many of you are probably thinking, me uncovering my partner's infidelity was definitely not working for me, but they might still be minimizing, lying about it, rationalizing it, justifying it, saying all these reasons why it's not that big of a deal, and using all these sayings, men cheat, or anyone who's monogamous, animals aren't meant to be monogamous, who knows? But that alone is a tough circumstance to work with. I can only be as productive as the lowest functioning and less willing person in my room. If someone is not coming into my office saying that there's a problem here and things aren't working for me, and also demonstrating a desire to change or be better and do better and be honest about what's going on, I don't have many tools to challenge, poke, prod, educate, make suggestions. Now, again, my background in this type of field for the past 15 or so years has allowed me to have extra skills to confront and challenge and move clients from like, this isn't a problem. These are all the reasons why I was justified and entitled. And, I lack empathy and compassion, and slowly challenge and confront and move them to a place where they know those aren't truths anymore. They're just defense mechanisms. But that takes a lot of time. And sometimes there's a process of needing to develop a rapport with the, again, lowest functioning, less willing participant in the room. Push them a little bit, but realize they have a really fragile ego and a really low tolerance for uncomfortable feelings, and needing to pull back a little bit. Because if the goal is for them to keep coming back and keep trying to make little changes towards being better, doing better, leaning into influence, structure, accountability, to help the betrayed partner heal and have safety, it's kind of all a part of the dance that happens in addiction treatment and addiction recovery. So there is a nuance there. And again, I always encourage betrayed partners, if you're feeling frustrated in that area, to please speak up, talk about what's frustrating, make it clear why you don't feel like you're being validated, and important things like that. So let's talk a little bit about how we use accountability in addiction recovery as a foundation for healing. So I try to use this nuance where I push them to feel feelings of guilt, right? I want them to feel uncomfortable about the things that they've done, the choices they've made. Because guilt is a productive feedback loop system in your body. The yucky twang of like, ugh, I don't like how that felt. I don't like, lying to someone, or seeing my partner cry, or having them threaten to leave the relationship, or potential legal consequences. The guilt of that is something I can use to help challenge. But the shame, and again, I have videos on shame if you want to know about guilt versus shame, but shame's this just very big, intangible, I'm just bad, I'm wrong. And as long as someone's in a shame state, then there's nothing productive they can do, right? It's not like, I just need to tell the truth and tell it faster. I need to go to meetings and stop doing these acting out behaviors. No, it's just like, oh yeah, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm the bad one. Yeah, I'm the worst, I caused all the problems. We can't confront that. So we needed to hone into the guilt, the pain of the guilt versus the shame, which is just a shutdown intangible, like you're bad, you're wrong. We use accountability of, I always want to ask direct questions. I want specificity when people are talking. I want them to end the double life leading, no more lying, manipulation of any kind, radical honesty versus trickle truths, developing empathy, and then boundaries as safety, not as a punishment, right? So it's not like, hey, if you don't start going to treatment, so a betrayed partner saying, hey, if you don't start going to 12-step meetings, getting a sponsor, start working the steps in the next 3 months, I think we're going to have to separate or do it in home separation. That's not a boundary set to be like, that's your punishment because you're a bad person. It's meant to say, I can't live in this insanity of someone who's lying and manipulating all the time. And I'm setting like a very clear boundary of what I need in order to feel safe. The last thing I want to say that causes some conflict with betrayed partners versus addiction therapists and the acting out partners is that there's a tough balance between when I am seeing an individual therapist, right? Whether it's it's a betrayed partner, or if it's an addict, that is my defined client. And so I am there to help them meet their goals. I am there to push them appropriately, to educate them appropriately, to be an accountability partner, to remind them of their goals, and all that kind of stuff. It's more complicated when it's in a couple setting, because then my defined client is the coupleship. And if they both said they want to work on the marriage, repair the marriage, it goes back to that original thing I was saying about therapy being an art. Okay, if the client is the coupleship and staying in the marriage, there's some nuance there about, keeping the acting out partner engaged, working towards recovery, but managing their very fragile ego, and that they haven't done any feeling tolerance for many, many years. And we have to build that up before we can kind of push and challenge that, while also trying to make the betrayed partner feel validated, seen, heard, and give that person a voice where they're feeling like they have a path towards stability and that they don't have to put up with this anymore. It is a dance, and it is so delicate trying to create that balance. But yes, you should never feel like someone is invalidating, minimizing, mocking you, or questioning your sanity because you're having a understandable traumatic reactivity or traumatic response. It's just very delicate. So these are my conclusions that I want you to know is People will express frustration with addiction therapists in this field, but I feel like the CSAT training program, the ADSAP training program are the only standardized therapy models that I know of that offer this kind of treatment for people. So like I met someone recently, he was just a run-of-the-mill couples therapist. And then he started seeing these types of problems and these types of clients show up in his office more and more. And he wanted the skill set to be able to do all these things that we talked about: confront, educate, create a foundation or a structure for recovery to help the addict stop behaving this way, to help stop the betrayed or help the betrayed partner feel safe again. And so he sought out gaining a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist training, in order to do this. I mean, all in all, these are great things. These types of certifications, I feel like, as well, improve the entire addiction recovery model. And that I can tell you from working in addiction recovery treatment centers and in this field for many years, people will start with substance abuse and then it'll turn into cheating, or get recovery in one area of their life, but then it'll trickle into something else: pornography use, gambling, overworking, and really understanding all these different ways that we can misuse what feels like benign items, our phone, working. We might say we're just trying to be very charismatic and friendly with people, but really we push boundaries and we have inappropriate relationships with people. These are all really great things to know when you're handling someone who has an addiction history, that the fact that people can transfer addictions, have dual diagnoses, and it gives you tools to assess these people, ask the direct questions, and establish a better definition, a broader definition of what recovery and sobriety should look like. It is imperfect, but it is always growing and changing, this field. I always say sex addiction, love addiction, porn addiction, intimacy disorders, compulsive sexual behaviors, whatever you call it. I feel like it is where substance abuse addiction was about 40 years ago. It's developing and it's becoming a broader, more understood problem. I definitely see that by having a strong presence on the internet. And there's more people now that understand how to help these individuals and their partners and their family. So please, keep voicing these concerns. Keep asking these questions in these webinars. Your voice is important. Your concerns are important. And bring them up, especially to your own professionals, so that they can grow and be better and understand how they can show up better for you and your partner and during your path towards recovery. And now I'll take questions. That when you say someone has an addiction or a sex addiction, it is not an excuse. When I was preparing for this webinar, I was thinking of one of these clients I had who she had like bipolar, but with psychotic symptoms. So if she did not take her medication, she would start thinking that God would talk to her. And then she would go into these really deep places where she would forget to pick her kids up from school. She would set fires in her house by accident because she would leave like pots on the stove because she would get so engaged in her psychosis. Now, diagnosing her as bipolar with psychotic symptoms never, ever excuses or cancels out the fact that if she does not take steps to keep herself safe and stable, right? Go to therapy, go to the groups, take her medication, all these things she needs to just kind of stay on this earth with us, making good choices and healthy coping skills. She has to do those things in order to be safe for her children, to be present for her partner. The absence of that causes a lot of problems. So I think that's a really great metaphor or parallel example to help you understand how diagnosis is not an excuse. Sure, you can maybe have a foundation of empathy for someone when you understand it's a mental health issue. But again, it's similar to depression or anxiety. I might struggle with depression and anxiety, but that does not forego a requirement or responsibility that I have to manage it. There are things I have to do. Similar again, if I got diagnosed with diabetes, there are things I am supposed to do as a consequence of being diagnosed with diabetes. For many betrayed partners, what I say is what happened to you, you did not sign up for any of it, and none of it is your fault that your partner has gone and had these compulsive sexual behaviors and you've been lied to and manipulated. But now that you have this traumatized body, it has unfortunately become your responsibility to get treatment to try to manage the traumatic wiring that now exists in your body, leading to all these mental, physical, emotional consequences. So I hope that helps you understand that. What steps can the addict take to build healthy intimacy? Not just stopping the addictive behavior, and how long would you guess it would take someone who's been an addict for 30 years to be interested in healthy intimacy and sexuality? He's been sober 3 months. This comes up a lot. And let me say one thing I know from the work that I've done for so many years, they cannot do it alone. Addicts, I believe, or anyone struggling with intimacy, right? Avoidant behavior, or lying and sneaking around, however you want to define it, poor choices, they have to engage a community of people who have suffered and struggled in a similar way. Why? Because that community can challenge them. They can say, me too, like you're not a unicorn, you're not special. We've done this too, and yet we've still learned how to get sobriety and recovery in this. And three, there's an art or a healing that just comes from showing up to these places and being able to share your story with people. There's this terrible saying that they have sometimes in 12 steps, which is like, unless you've killed 2 people in the past week, we've heard a variation of this before. And it's supposed to be a shame resilience type thing to say, look, you got to get it out. The truth shall set you free. It is not the lying and the sneaking around, the manipulation, and the hiding and the isolation, and I'm bad and I'm wrong. That is not serving you. We have a long history to demonstrate that. So come to a bunch of people who have suffered and struggled in a similar way, and many of them have found recovery despite having this history. And let's see if we can help you. Can you lean into us? Can you accept our influence? Can you live in consultation with us? And so the more they engage with that type of group, doing the 12 steps, having a sponsor, speaking to them, that I think improves their chances mightily. When you have been bamboozled, do you ever reach out to the partner assuming that the necessary releases are signed? I personally am not a believer in secrets, so I'm like a non-secrets couples therapist. So especially because they've been so harmed by, so I always get releases signed if I'm seeing couples. They both are signing, but not only that, when I'm working with a betrayed partner, and then the addict is working with another therapist, and then they're working with a therapist as a couple, I will have them all sign releases. And the best work I do is when I have a connection, either an email connection to the addict's therapist or the couple's therapist, because we want to share information. We want to make sure that everyone has all the information they need to confront, challenge, check in for safety, make sure that everybody has all the information they need to do the best possible work that they can do. So yes, releases are always necessary. It's not just a release to talk to partners. It's also releases to talk to therapists. And because in the situation of addiction, there really shouldn't be anything that is withheld. It's not the right environment. Some people will say, the sponsor's relationship is special, and no one should be, that should be the place and space where the addict can kind of say whatever they want and deal with all that stuff. Everyone has different opinions on that kind of stuff. I personally, when the symptom and the problem and the trauma is all related to lying, sneaking around, shame related to those behaviors, it can't be present in the recovery. When relationships don't survive after the therapeutic full disclosure, what are the reasons you typically see for this? I feel like I can't get past what I learned and I don't want to. Is that normal? Yes, that's what's normal. What I tend to see is that I already see people who are halfway out the door, meaning betrayed partners. Once they discovered this, they were halfway out the door. The addict does the full disclosure reluctantly. And then they kind of have all the information they need to be like, yeah, this is the harm that has been caused from these lying and sneaking around behaviors is more than my desire to hang around here with someone who already seems unwilling, pushing back, non-empathetic. Like I still don't see that he or she is humbled and surrendered and wants to be better and do better. And now I also just heard all this devastating information. And this is kind of all I need to step away from this. And yeah, sometimes you can't unsee it. You can't unhear it. And that's okay. I would say it's okay to stay, and it's okay to leave, and it's okay to have hope, and it's okay to be completely apathetic and release yourself from it and be disconnected from it. There is no judgment. That is all normal. And I see all versions of that. So I have some betrayed partners groups there's about 5 spots left in my betrayed partners group that is starting March 17. So you can go to kristensnowden.com. And if you want to join a 4-week group, and in about a month, I'm going to have a grief and loss group for betrayed partners as well. So again, please join my mailing list on kristensnowden.com or check out any of my YouTube videos. on my channel, Kristen Snowden, but I am here to provide you as many resources as possible. But I really appreciate being part of this webinar, so thank you for having me.